Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, everybody's had a good lunch. Let me start by asking you a question. How many of you have seen the movie Hidden Figures? Okay, if you haven't, you should. Great. Some few hands have gone up. If you haven't, you should. It's the movie about the early space program where the computation for the space flights and the orbits trajectories were being done by a human being. And at that time, those were women. The women were actually called computer. The term computer was for a woman who would compute and had to be able to understand complex mathematics to do. Now, in the movie, they show how computers start to come in. And it's a pivotal moment because you see the women saying, oh, you know what? What's going to happen to our jobs? But there are some who then reinvent themselves and figure, imagine trying to run a program to Mars today by computing by hand. So I think we've gone through multiple technology journeys. Computing being one in the beginning, we've gone through mobile journeys, we've gone through the internet journey. I don't think any one of us can imagine a world without any of these technologies. Now, artificial intelligence is not new. It's been evolving in academia, in research organizations for quite a long time. It's gone through what is called AI winters and then has sprung up. I would say in maybe 2014 or something is when deep learning really took off and began to do work on vision, and then speech, etc. More recently, we are hearing this thing called generative AI, and it has got, or chat GPT, I'm assuming everybody in the room has dabbled with ChatGPT in some way. What I'd like to do in this session with the two experts I have here is maybe three objectives, right? Try to cut the hype a little bit and get down to some facts. Think of AI, generative AI, as a toolbox in your arsenal. And third, think about how you would work differently or how your industry or organization might work differently. Hopefully, you leave with some takeaways for these areas. But let me start by asking my colleagues here, what do you feel about generative AI today? And I would say +5 for being super optimistic, -5 for being super pessimistic. How do you feel today? Mike, maybe I start with you.
Well, I really am a +5 on this. So I'm very, very optimistic.
Wonderful. So we'll come to that, and I'd love to hear more as to why and what makes you so. Debasis.
Rohini, I think I have a split personality here, right? As a data scientist, I'm +5, like Mike is. But I think as a capability lead in a industry which is very, very regulated, I think I'm round about +2 there. Still optimistic, but a guarded +2.
Yeah, and I can relate to that, and I can understand where you're coming from, because people who have been technical, who have grown in this field for decades, also understand what are the issues involved, etc. Perfect. So I think, given that you're +5, maybe I could start by asking you, Mike, what are the type of applications, use cases, real value generation opportunities that you are most excited about?
Yeah, so in my role as a Forrester analyst.
Can all of you hear Mike?
Hello. Maybe it needs to be closer, or I need to sit differently. So in my role as a Forrester analyst, I cover AI, and so I look at these technologies. The use case that we wrote about actually a few years ago was something that we called Turing bots. And we named it Turing bots after Alan Turing. It was sort of a shout out to him. And this is the code gen large language models, right? So these are like GitHub Copilot. IBM has something called Project Wisdom, which outputs Ansible scripts. So the ability to actually generate code is sort of my favorite use case. I've actually talked to clients who, and this is anecdotal, that they claim, oh, we're writing 10% of our code with this. It's saving us a lot of time. So I'm very high on that use case. Plus, it won't offend anyone. if you generate the code, it's not going to say something nasty. It's just going to write code. So it's kind of a safe use case.
Okay. Your thoughts on that, Debashish, and then your favorite use cases.
So I'll start with my most favorite use case, and this is nothing to do with any of our enterprise or companies or sector, tech sector or anything like that. I think my most favorite use case is it is going to make the common man very, very much more productive. When I say that is because it will actually act as a convergence point for a lot of technologies that, or capabilities that we today already have, right? And it struck me in different situations. Today, people are trying to use their mobile phones, take pictures, describe situations in which they are trying to even manage some of the workflows, right? I've seen some of the companies actually managing workflows using rudimentary capabilities on their mobile phones, which I think is going to see a tremendous leap and bound if we have this kind of a technology, coming to the hands of common people. I think it will kill the digital divide. We were talking about barriers and how in India, particularly, we have used technology to, skip a few steps and go leap and bound. I think, education probably isn't going to matter much now, right? People can just, in their native language, ask questions to their phones. It is going to translate. It is going to find the answers, and it is going to, translate back into your native language and kind of give you solutions. Just imagine if, what that is going to do to the digital divide that we have today. But that is my most favorite sort of
The consumer side.
Consumer side. I'm a vision I'm that looking forward to. But on an enterprise side, I think I'd say three different things, and I'm not going to talk more detail about it. But first thing is what we are seeing today and what we're envisioning is matching the content with the intent. Right? People are coming to our enterprise services or even digital front with some intent. How can we best match our content with that, right? And content of various kinds. Typically search, question answering systems, and all of that is part of that. The second kind of use case that I get really excited about is automate to accelerate, I would say. A lot of things can be automated through this kind of technologies, translation, summarization kind of use cases, which is going to be very, very, practical going forward. And the third kind of use case I can see is creativity for productivity, right? Powerful technology given to some of our, creative talent in the company can generate content, can generate different kinds of visuals and even perform simulations and design iterations. I think that's going to be huge. So those are the three types of use cases that we may see come in near future.
Any thoughts that sparks with you, Mike?
Well, yeah, so summarization is, just think about in financial services, equity, like writing summarizations of games, like sports contests, or anything else that has to be summarized. So a lot of like automated journalism, I think is going to come out of this. A lot of graphic design assist, AI in the loop type of thing. So humans still in control, but AI in the loop of it. So tremendous productivity gains in certain activities like that. So I think those sort of practical use cases are, we're still sort of experimental, but I think those practical use cases are going to start popping up. And we've been talking about text, but there's also, you've talked about images a little bit too, but there's also images as well. And people are concerned about the data sets that were used. But for example, I think Adobe is releasing a generative AI image generator, but it's from their stock photos, so anyone subscribing to that service can use that. So there's challenges to this where the data comes from, but I think these services are going to come on very, very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good segue because my next question is that as people start to experiment with some of the use cases that you and Debasis have brought out, what are the considerations, what are the risks, or are there any issues that they need to be thinking about? Maybe Debasis, you could start.
Sure. I think very, very practical considerations. Can I retrain this model? Right? Very basic. I mean, yes, this is a fantastic model that or an algorithm that is out there for usage. But practically, can I retrain it for the content of my business cases and things like that? And when I say that, there are nuances involved in curating the data for this kind of retraining that is required, the infrastructure that is required, and of course the appropriate use cases, because not every use case kinds of automatically fits in that retraining part. So that's number one. Number two is, I would say also is explainability. And Rohini, you and I know, being in this field, how we sort of struggle even to explain a neural network model to different stakeholders or different business people, or even what outcome is generated. It is all the more complex now to sort of explain what technologies like generative AI is going to generate, right? So it is very important as practitioners to keep in mind, can I explain this, even so naively, right? Can I explain this a little bit? And the third step, I would say, is to keep in mind is the whole ethics side of it, right? Can I put a strong governance function in place to regulate what it is spewing out, what output is being given, whether it is appropriate to expose my customer base to directly to what it is giving, right? Or how much of manual curation is required, how much of human-machine collaboration is required to do that. So those are the, I think, three things that come to my mind.
I think good points. And I think maybe, Mike, if you could give a slightly broader picture on issues one needs to think about. And I'd like to add a few thoughts based on what the two of you have said after that.
Things like what it will do to employment and
well, I'm thinking about, let's say, in an enterprise, and everybody here is from some organization, whether tech or everybody today is a tech organization pretty much. As they're thinking about what this is, what it means for their organization, what are the use cases that they could potentially experiment with, what are the issues to consider?
Yeah, I mean, if you're using it to generate content, whether it's images or text, that's going to be consumed by customers, right? There's a risk, because it's practically non-deterministic, right? It's that explainability piece. So you may not be able to automate it confidently that you're not going to put some offensive information out there. On the other hand, that's sort of what it's perfect for, right? If you can ask it a certain question with some personal details about the individual, it's going to customize it actually to them, and perhaps it could even avoid sort of offensive content. So I think getting back to what you said about the governance, there's going to have to be some kind of a governance or checkpoint that organizations are going to have to put into place, and they're going to have what you always have to have in machine learning is some sort of feedback loop to label the information so that it can learn from your specific circumstances. So I think that's the main consideration. I think people are concerned, though, about like, what will this do to employment? But we heard this like 3 years ago, 4 years ago about AI as well. Like, and this is really, I think this is a lot of journalistic hype. Like, oh yes, there's going to be some cataclysmic loss of jobs. But I think it's important to remember that AI is software, and we've had experience with software and how it increases productivity. And it's going to assist humans at first. It is going to replace it. If something's going to make someone 700% more productive, then you're not going to need as many people doing that. But it's not sort of a cataclysmic change. It's going to change gradually. So there's not going to be like an immediate impact on the workforce. If anything, like if I was to advise a young person getting into technology, it's like understand conceptually how this works, so that your role is to be the sort of the zookeeper of these models.
Yeah, that's interesting term. I think you talked about coding, you talked about images, text. I think the important thing, and you also brought about the point about inclusion. What I'm seeing is use cases and ability for the common person to engage with fairly complex. Let's think about government, schemes, health issues, etc. Right? The ability for a common person to engage with those is a huge enabler that I'm seeing. But I think the point that you are mentioning about explainability. Let me ask you this question. I think explainability is one attribute, but do you see that as something that is applicable or required for every possible use case, or is that something that you would think about, what do I really need for my use case, and how do I make this balance between productivity gains and the risk that I want to mitigate?
It's a very good question, Rohini. I think you are talking about the AI winter and all of that, right? And then we have come a long way now for this beautiful technology to develop, right? And you are right. Not in all cases there is a need for explainability, right? Because very strangely, as a data scientist, right, when you are developing a model, you have an intuitive feeling of what the model is doing, right? It's a very difficult thing, though, to explain that to everybody, right?
Right.
Saying that, oh, this is how it is doing. Now, and I've seen people kind of come up with 40 different, graphs explaining what will happen if you miss out a parameter, if you include that parameter, what happens, and things like that. So yes, I mean, not in all cases do we need explainability. I think generally there is a lot of faith in the system now. People have seen models generally work, and so we don't need that. But corner cases, as a data scientist, what I'm worried about is this is a beautiful technology. Before it actually gets a bad name, right? Like all the bad press that comes out, like somebody is chatting with it and it is, ChatGPT is threatening to, or abusing or expressing love, or, saying that you are wrong, I'm bold, I'm right, you are wrong, and those kind of things. These are corner cases that gets reported, right? So we, as a profession, I think what bothers me is we need to be ready to explain why that happens, right? If you're able to do that, people will understand that, yes, this generative AI is going to make certain biased output, or going to produce some biased output, is going to go wrong at some times, but at least we know where it is going wrong, how it is going wrong, why it is going wrong.
And I think the other thing to think about, though, is that there's not just going to be, there's not one model.
Yeah.
There's going to be thousands of these models trained on various data sets. And, for like, could be particular legal system trained on contracts. Every industry has its jargon. Any group, a religious group, or any other group for that matter, can train a model any way they want. So there's going to be thousands of these models, just like there's millions of people. And sometimes I wonder, we want to apply all of these standards to the models, yet we can't explain why people say things either, right?
Yeah.
So do we have the same standard for models as we have for each other people, or do we have a higher standard? I think we probably do need a higher standard if there's one model, or if a company is using that model, because that model is going to represent them. But that also brings up another, what I think is a philosophical point, is can we be offended by a computer? I guess, or should we? Or should we be offended by what a computer says? Maybe we shouldn't, because it's just a computer. So anyway, there's some interesting things to think about.
Yeah, lots you've packed in there. I think the question, and to your point, right, Mike, it's very early days.
Yeah.
And it's a very different kind of technology. It's not that it's, ChatGPT brought it out to the common public, which is why it's gotten all the media attention. But it's not that generative AI it suddenly didn't come out of the box just like that.
Yeah.
Right? The pieces behind it have been going on for some time. The transformer architecture was developed in 2017. The whole reinforcement learning, many of these things have been developing over years and decades, if you will, right? So it's very early. And therefore, we as a society are learning. But let me ask you, if you had a crystal ball, what would you say we can expect for this technology, given you cover the space over the next 2 or 3 years, or at least what can we see in the rest of 2023?
So I think of this in business and consumer. In consumer, I think this becomes a novelty that people will use, and like gaming companies, for example. Like if you think of the next generation Xbox type games with these type of models in there, wow, the level of interaction, what NPCs can now do, it's amazing. So I think it has enormous entertainment value, and I think we'll see it in every game, and maybe even other kind of interactive type of television or video type shows.
Yeah.
In the business world, I think the coding, the one I brought up, the Turing bots, that's already being used, and I think because it's being used by developers, I think there's like a built-in rapid feedback loop because they're already technologists. So I think it's going to have a very big impact on coding and application development. It's not going to take it over, but it's going to be like that big assist. That big
Copilot is what?
Yeah, Copilot's one of them.
Yeah.
And then I also think the summarization use case, the use case where it can just take gobs of information and then summarize that information out. And the one thing we didn't, the other thing that companies have to be careful of is that automation bias, that we assume that the answer is right coming out of it, and we know that it's not. And anyone in here who's tested it and tried to exercise it a bit, you can get something wrong with it, and it will get better through that feedback loop, which is one of the reasons why it's been put out there.
Yeah.
So I think these use cases will be rapid. But I think another thing is going to happen because of this is that this is also going to accelerate non-generative AI use cases because of the cultural interest in this. It raises the awareness of AI, and I think because of that, enterprises are going to accelerate other non-generative use cases.
Great. I think that's a good point to pause. If there are a couple of questions, I'm happy to take a couple of questions, but let me just summarize so far. It's a new technology. It is out there. We are seeing very early days. There are use cases which require all of us in our respective organizations to think about how would we work differently as a co-pilot. And there are methods in which to think about how do you put governance in place. Any questions? Couple of questions I'll take in. I'm sure there are a couple of minutes left. Any questions? Time out? One question? Okay, one question.
I think there is one.
All right.
So, talking specifically about the use case of app centers using conversational AI. So, there are many tools which are non-generative in nature, which use regular neural networks or short-term memory. Do you think that with coming of generative AI, those conversational AI tools which don't use generative AI, will they take a backseat, or they would be a friend of existing AI along with generative AI in automating contact centers and more?
I was going to say a blend.
Yeah, I mean, see the way, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so a blend only because, at least initially, right? Because you need to prime the pump with those conversations. You need a training data set, and you don't know if you have a train. It depends what, you know, the detail of this. So I think you're going to be able to take your data sets and train it on top of this model, like on Azure, for example. But I think that governance piece that we've talked about, but we don't have time to talk deeply about, that existing technology that's already being used starts to become the governance piece, I think. It starts to become the safety valve for what this other model is doing. But I do think eventually, yes, I do eventually think it will take over.
I would give a very metric-centric answer, right? What is the precision and recall or coverage of your existing model, and what your competing model is going to be? Always depends on that. Plus the governance side of it. I mean, is it really appropriate to expose what it spews out and things like that? Those two things will definitely play a role in whether they're going to replace, whether they're going to coexist. We'll see.
Great, thank you. Think of it as a tool in your overall toolbox. That's how you have to think about it. All right, great. Thank you so much for your attention. Hopefully this was interesting after lunch. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
For more interesting content, like, comment and subscribe to our NASSCOM YouTube channel.